When workers began restoring the old statue of Jesus, they had no idea they were about to uncover a secret that could change everything we knew about that sacred figure. What seemed like just another common religious work turned out to be something much greater, something hidden for decades, perhaps even centuries. Imagine discovering that Christ, in his symbolic image, carried a secret message, carefully preserved over time. What might this restored statue have to tell us? What can its relics teach us about our faith today? Get ready for a revelation that could transform your view of spirituality and the power of prayer. Imagine, for a moment, standing before an ancient statue of Jesus Christ, something that appears to be just a religious piece of art, weathered by the passage of time. But then, something unusual happens. A crack at the base of the statue begins to open, revealing a hidden compartment. It's as though that sacred image had been holding on to a secret for years, waiting to be discovered. What seemed like just a piece of history becomes a doorway to something much deeper. Who, after all, would hide something inside a statue of Christ? What could these secrets reveal? Inside the compartment, they found yellowed documents and mysterious objects. They seemed like ancient artifacts, but ones with a significance that defied any simple explanation. The feeling was that there was something divine about this entire process. It was as though the statue wasn't just a symbol of faith, but a silent testament to something much greater. This is what happens when we open ourselves to the mystery of faith. The Bible constantly reminds us that there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, Luke 12 verse 2. And here, the revelation came in the form of objects no one expected to find. The discovery of something hidden inside a statue of Jesus is not just a curious fact. It calls us to look beyond what our eyes can see. And as we reflect on this, we realize how often our own spirituality holds secrets, something deep, waiting to be unlocked. As young Christians, we can sometimes become so focused on our everyday lives that we forget the value of the hidden, the quiet prayers, the devotions that truly touch our hearts. Faith, like this discovery, is often a journey to uncover what is hidden in plain sight. The objects found inside the statue, in some way, seemed to carry a unique mystery. They weren't just items, they seemed like pieces intended to communicate something. Why would someone hide valuable objects, like manuscripts and rosary beads, in a secret compartment within a religious statue? This raises an interesting question. Could there be hidden messages or warnings, passed down through generations, waiting for someone with open eyes and faith to understand them? What do these relics mean, not just for the past, but for the present? In the history of the Bible, we see examples of sacred objects being used to communicate God's will. The Ark of the Covenant itself was more than just an object, it was a representation of God's presence. So, what could these hidden objects tell us? If they were in a statue of Jesus Christ, perhaps the meaning is deeper than we can imagine. They could be symbols of resistance, unshakable faith, or even warnings about the importance of keeping our connection with the gospel alive, never to be abandoned or neglected. Christianity teaches us that there is always more, something invisible, waiting to be discovered, if we are willing to seek it with a sincere heart. This mystery is also a metaphor for our life of faith. Often, spirituality reveals itself in ways we don't expect. How many times have you come across a verse or a prayer that, seemingly insignificant at first, later became the key to your understanding in a moment of need? The true search for faith, like the study of Scripture and worship, requires that we look beyond the surface and allow ourselves to be touched by what is hidden, by what isn't immediately visible. This is what makes the devotional journey so fascinating. As scholars examined the documents found inside the statue, they began to understand that they weren't merely ancient relics but gateways to a history that spanned generations. Every page, every word written, carried the context of a time when faith, religion, and spirituality were more than just personal beliefs, they were the pillars of society. The Bible and sermons from that time weren't just spiritual guidance, they were survival guides, acts of resistance, and, at times, revolution. Studying these documents wasn't just about history, it was about understanding how those who wrote them lived and how their faith shaped their actions in the world. These manuscripts brought to light a context of great religious and social unrest. In times of persecution or crisis, religious objects and documents of faith were hidden to protect both the message and the bearers of that faith. Christianity, as always, was a force of resistance against those who sought to silence Christ's message. As we study these documents, we can see how Christians of that time used religion as an anchor, a safe place where faith became resistance. As young Christians today, we might ask ourselves, does our faith have the same transformative and protective power as it did back then? Or are we simply following a ritual without understanding the real impact it can have on our lives? This revelation also reminds us of the importance of understanding the context of our own faith. Today's Christianity is rich in tradition and history, but sometimes we forget that these roots were planted with sweat and blood. The worship and adoration of today hold immeasurable value, but for them to truly transform us, we need to understand where they came from and how the gospel was passed down by those who came before us. Bible study, prayer, and testimonies of faith help us make that connection, bringing out the true meaning of our spiritual journey. Among the items found in the statue, some objects stood out for their profound spiritual significance. Rosary beads, fragments of sacred fabric, and other religious items indicated that the statue was not just a symbol of worship but a true spiritual refuge. These objects, though physical, carried with them a transcendent message. They were not merely relics, but testimonies of the faith of people who, in difficult times, sought symbols that connected them to God. It was not just about the material, but about the faith these objects represented and the spirituality they inspired. It's fascinating to think that, just like these spiritually valuable objects, faith can be an anchor in our own lives. The rosary, for example, isn't just a string of beads, but a powerful tool for prayer and meditation, a way to attune ourselves with the divine. Worship and praise aren't mere rituals. They are moments of deep connection with Christ, where we surrender to His presence and allow Him to guide us. Every fragment of faith, no matter how small it seems, has the power to transform us. Just as the statue served as a symbol of faith, we too are called to be living symbols of our belief in Jesus Christ, carrying His light to the world in all circumstances. The importance of these relics is not limited to their historical or material value. They show us how objects of faith can be sources of spiritual resistance. Think of the small things in your life that can become great channels of connection to the divine. Sometimes, it's the silent prayer, the daily Bible study, or even the simple act of dedicating time to the church that makes all the difference. As young Christians, these small gestures can be our own sacred objects, helping us maintain our faith firm and our spirits resilient, even in times of adversity. The discovery of the hidden compartment inside the statue had a profound impact on the local community. What initially seemed like a simple statue of Jesus became a point of attraction for visitors from all over, coming in search of answers to spiritual or historical questions. For many, that discovery represented a direct connection to their ancestors, an opportunity to better understand their roots, and, at the same time, to strengthen their own faith. The statue, once just a religious work of art, now became a living symbol of faith and mystery, where the past and present intertwined in a unique way. This kind of impact is a powerful reflection of what true faith can do for a community. When something like this happens, collective faith is strengthened because people feel they are part of something greater. In Christianity, the church is often seen as a place of worship, but also of fellowship. Bible studies, praise, and group prayers create an atmosphere where spirituality becomes a collective force. That moment of discovery not only touched hearts but united people from different backgrounds and paths, all in search of something greater that could connect them. In an increasingly individualistic society, moments like this remind us that faith is also a communal journey. The story of how a simple statue, transformed into a symbol of faith, attracted so many people is a clear example of how testimonies of faith can resonate in our lives. When you live your faith authentically, without hiding anything, it becomes an example for others. In your work, in your family, in the church, as you practice worship and prayer, you become a beacon, a living symbol of Christian faith. And, just like the statue did, you can also impact the lives of those around you, inspiring them to seek spirituality more deeply in their own lives. After the discovery of the objects inside the statue, researchers faced the challenge of how to preserve both the statue and the items found without damaging them. The use of modern conservation techniques was essential. Advanced technology allowed specialists to examine the statue without causing physical harm, creating detailed digital records of the artifacts and performing thorough analyses. This not only ensured historical preservation, but also allowed future generations to access this history without compromising its integrity. These techniques are an example of how innovation can unite with tradition, preserving the past while paving the way for the future. The application of these modern techniques is a powerful metaphor for how we should care for our faith and spirituality. The Gospel teaches us that we should be good stewards of God's blessings, and this includes caring for what is sacred. Sometimes, our spiritual lives may resemble an ancient statue, full of hidden treasures that need to be tended to with attention and wisdom. The use of technologies, such as deep analysis and reflection through prayer or Bible study, can help preserve and reinforce our connection with the divine, without losing its essence. For today's young Christians, this is crucial, as faith can be an anchor in times of turmoil, but only if it is cared for with dedication and respect. Furthermore, these conservation techniques highlight the importance of preserving something sacred so it can remain relevant in the future. Spirituality, worship, and praise are practices that should be constantly cultivated, just like the conservation of a valuable artifact. When you invest time in your relationship with God, through prayer and participation in worship, you are using modern methods to preserve something that is immortal. This is what makes faith so unique. It adapts to time and circumstances, but its essence never changes. Thus, looking toward the future, we can ensure that future generations also find in the same foundations of faith the tools they need for their own spiritual transformation. The discovery of the statue and its objects holds a fascinating aspect: how religious history connects with local culture and how these elements can resonate in our lives. The statue of Jesus was not just a piece of worship, but a reflection of the religious and cultural struggles of the people of that time. Every element found, from the rosary beads to the fragments of sacred fabric, carried a piece of the history of the community that lived and resisted adversity through faith. These objects remind us that faith does not live in a vacuum, but is deeply rooted in the cultural, social, and historical realities of a community. Christianity, like all religions, is an intrinsic part of the history of each people, shaping their responses to the crises and challenges of life. In the Bible, we see how faith has always reflected the culture around it, but also how it has served as a form of resistance. Early Christians used symbols, like the fish, to identify themselves and resist persecution. Similarly, the people who hid the documents and objects within the statue were, in some way, practicing silent resistance. These items not only carry religious meaning, but also cultural significance. They represent the preservation of a spiritual identity in the midst of crisis. This challenges us to reflect: how, today, are we connecting our faith with our culture and history? Are we preserving the lessons of the past to help shape the future? The connection between history, religion, and culture also leads us to reflect on the role of the church and the faith community today. The church is not just a place of worship, but also a cultural gathering point where life experiences intertwine with the teachings of the gospel. Worship and prayer are not just acts of devotion, but also ways to connect past generations with the future. As young Christians, we must be aware that our practices of faith not only connect us with God, but also with the history of those who came before us. It is our responsibility to carry on this rich spiritual heritage, keeping the flame of faith alive for the future. The discovery of the statue and the religious objects went far beyond the local community. It reverberated through the academic world, sparking intense interest across various fields of knowledge. Historians, archaeologists, religious scholars, and even theologians came together to study these artifacts, seeking to understand their origin and meaning. This cross-disciplinary collaboration brought new perspectives on the relationship between art, faith, and resistance. The study of religious history and the preservation of sacred objects became a bridge between different cultures and historical contexts, expanding the global understanding of the impact of spirituality on societies over the centuries. This phenomenon reminds us of the importance of knowledge and the relentless pursuit of truth. In the Bible, Jesus Christ teaches us to seek understanding and wisdom. The academic study of the documents found in the statue exemplifies how faith is not something that should be seen subjectively, but can also be explored and deepened through research and analysis. Just as Bible study invites us to look more deeply into the Word, academic collaboration allows us to better understand the historical and cultural context in which Christianity was born and spread. It is an opportunity to expand our faith, broadening our understanding and practices of worship, by recognizing the value of study and reflection. Furthermore, this global collaboration demonstrates how faith impacts not only local communities, but the entire world. The history of the Church, the testimonies of faith, and the teachings of Christ transcend cultural and geographical boundaries. By connecting different areas of study and people from all parts of the world, we can see how Christianity continues to influence contemporary history and culture. This teaches us that true faith knows no limits. It spreads, adapts, and reinvents itself, always maintaining the central truth of the gospel. As Christians, we are called to do the same. Spread the light of Christ in every area of our lives and reach the world with a message of hope, love, and salvation. What was once a simple statue of Jesus, hidden among the walls of history and the dust of time, has transformed into a living symbol of faith and resistance. The discovery of its hidden compartment and the valuable objects found within gave the statue new life, not only as a religious work of art, but as a point of connection between the past and the present. It is now seen not just as a symbol of worship, but as a reminder of the power that faith has to transform, resist, and survive the challenges of time. The statue, once just a religious object, now represented something deeper: the continuity of faith in times of adversity. This transformation is something we can directly apply to our own spiritual journey. Often, faith, like the statue, may seem static, a tradition without life. But, just as the statue became a symbol of resistance and renewed faith, our own spirituality can be revitalized when we look deeper into our devotional practices, prayer, and worship. Christianity teaches us to see Christ not just as a distant symbol, but as a living presence that guides and strengthens us every day. And the way we cultivate our faith can, indeed, transform what is ordinary into something extraordinary, like the statue of Jesus. The statue that once went unnoticed is now a source of inspiration for those who visit it. It has become a symbol of hope, a beacon lighting the way for those seeking meaning, comfort, and spiritual renewal. The example of faith and resistance it represents is something that can be replicated in our own lives. By living our faith authentically and full of devotion, we become living symbols of Christ, influencing those around us and showing them that true faith never fades, but always resurges in a new, strong, and vibrant way.